where this stands.
I'm going to record because we're recording a lot of these conversations. I'm going to see if I can call Brian to see if he can come onto the conversation. Oh, my cell phone is dead, so you're going to have to wait a few minutes. So the idea behind so let me just give you a little background, Chevy, and of course, as you will see, I'm kind of a lightning rod in there, so a lot of people are upset with me, but so I'll just put it out that my view is my views, and that I try to be very fair and represent really what's going on in a very non-passionate way. But basically, there's been a struggle between, you know, what an individual cell or an individual group can do, and you know, how we make decisions in terms of the party as a whole. And there is a tension between majority views and minority views in autonomy versus accountability, you know, that sort of tug of war. The current bylaws were written before we had computers, right? So a lot of current voting systems or current processes, especially post-COVID with, you know, the normalization of online meetings, did not exist when the bylaws were created. And also think that the bylaws really followed the old model that was a little bit hierarchical. You know, you have one group and then these people alive, whatever. And so the idea behind the current bylaws is to have a really very nuclear and very distributed decision power making, in a sense of, you know, consensus building and decision making, where cells and individual cells are really autonomous and they can do pretty much whatever they want. It's that, you know, freedom of choice, liberty, and so on. But at the same time, some accountability and being able to, as a group, project, you know, what the party represents or the party's views on various decisions. And the idea is not so that it doesn't come from the steering committee, but really from a process that involves participation and, you know, grassroots participation, whereas the coordinating committee or the steering committee is really more like a facilitator, kind of an administrator, making sure that the process works, and then allowing the cells to do whatever they want. While at the same time, if we find that a cell is particularly abusive, undemocratic, or doing, you know, things that are contrary to the key values of the Green Party, that to have recourse. And the only recourse that we have without, you know, while preserving autonomy of action at the local level is, you know, if you behave in unethical and harmful ways, we're just not going to list you. Like, we're not going to recognize your affiliation and we're not going to list you. So we're not going to promote you. So it's, you know, so you're still free to do whatever you want, you know, connect with other groups that believe the way you want. All power to you. It's your deal, right? But you do not represent the Green Party per se. So basically that's the background. So this guy, Brian, wants this very, distributed structure. And so him and a guy called Dan presented bylaw proposals in 2022, but unfortunately they didn't really go through like a series of meetings or consensus building processes. And so when it came to the convention, there was no agreement and it just got shut down. So this time around, we took, in the meantime, a gentleman called John Murray in Salem, in Eugene, out of Eugene, developed like a conflict resolution process or mediation process or process to develop consensus based on the Iroquois Foundation and Haudenosaunee nations, to where you have like an initiating group that wrote an initial proposal, and then you have a responding group. And if there is no full agreement, then there's a third larger group that kind of takes these, tries to come up with a solution. And, you know, then it goes again, does the initiating group agree with those solutions or those suggestions not? And so there's a process, 1 or 2 rounds, and eventually it goes to a vote. But hopefully by the time it goes to a vote, we have a document that in general people may agree with, but maybe one or two issues are not, need to be discussed or resolved, which is something different that we didn't have a process like that before. So this is like the first few months that we're trying to implement and work with this process. So Alan, who has a lot of experience in political science, and I met and discussed a lot of, like the proposals, this and that, kind of giving playing devil's advocate on both sides of the issue. And Alan basically rewrote the proposal and resubmitted it. And now Brian has some concerns about the proposal. So we're in that process. And there were also some suggestions by this gentleman called Dan. So we're in that process, and hopefully we'll have 2 more meetings, and hopefully one of them will show up at one of these meetings because they haven't really shown up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go offline, and Connor came online. And so Connor, if you can introduce yourself, I'm going to try to call Brian, see if he can come online so we can actually talk about the proposals and concerns and so on. Okay, give me just a sec.
Sure, thanks, Natalie. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Connor Salisbury, and I've been a member of the party for a number of years, and I'm currently on the SCC. And I also volunteer doing some of the IT stuff or tech stuff for the party.
I would add that Connor got caught in the middle of a lot of the struggles here in Lane County that kind of framed this issue of the bylaws, because the problems in that struggle have helped form different sides around the new bylaws and whether it would help prevent or solve problems like we've experienced here or not. And there's still a lot of lingering feelings over that.
Yeah, I watched the video on the last meeting, so that's all the background I really have on that. I also read the proposals document. I didn't find a link to the existing bylaws or if there's a draft document yet on what the new ones are, or if that proposal is close as we have right now. But I'm kind of curious to see what we're starting with and the direction we're going to.
Well, on the Pacific Green Party website, there will be somewhere in there, probably, let me see if I can find it, but it should say something about the about. On the About tab, goes down to how the party functions, and then there should be something about organizational documents. And then you can find, it brings you to that. PGP bylaws as of now. And then finding Brian's.
And I put the existing bylaws link in our chat to the website.
Okay. And then there is bylaws that were written by Brian that are findable somewhere. I'm not sure where. And then there are these set of revisions that Natalie and I worked on and then submitted before the deadline for the convention. Those are also somewhere in there.
They're all posted on the website. I took down Brian's initial proposal because I thought that he would be interested in ours, since they tend to, in my opinion, expand his grassroots part. But I'm going to, like right now as we speak, repost his.
No, you better.
So they're all linked onto the website. And if you give me just 1 second, I'll do that posting. I made you co-host, Alan, so you can find that. And also there is a folder, which I'm going to give you a link to, with a lot of the background documentation, like a lot of these proposals, and it's linked to it's the folder that we use for the convention materials. So let me just look it up, and I'll just to post it to you.
I would say that from my perspective, one of the biggest differences is understandings of what grassroots democracy means in practice. And as I understand them, Brian and Dan are working off a model in which activism by local Greens is grassroots. And I think that needs to be balanced by the understanding that when members come together in a convention, that's also grassroots activity, because people who are registered in the party are members. And by any definition of grassroots, I think people who are members are grassroots. So when they come together in a convention and they elect a state coordinating committee or whatever you want to call it, it should have some power to represent the interests of the membership at the convention that we could limit and restrict as members at a convention when we pass bylaws. But there is conflict now between what the role of the central body of the party in the state would be, how far its powers would extend, or how they'd be put into practice. And they seem to see my bylaws as creating more power for the central body. I would agree to some extent that's true, but I think those are also necessary and implied in their own proposal, but that's my opinion.
Go ahead, Connor.
I wanted to just add also, aside from the sort of ideological divide over whether chapters are supreme and over the state, or whether the state central authority, such as it is, due to being elected, is actually the designated top-level steward in the party, that having, just from a logistical standpoint, another concern, and part of what got this going is for our IT team, our social media moderator volunteers, we need some kind of clarity, because when we have people in administrative roles who end up tripping on one of these ideological divides, if we want to grow the party, we can't afford to have them basically treated like hostile actors for simply doing something that's actually in our, not just our own policy, but also being, for instance, on social media as a social media admin, you sign on to also follow Facebook policy or Twitter policy or YouTube policy. So some of these policies that we have for potentially stopping spamming behavior, de-adminning in essence has become a bone of contention, because one side perceives it as censoring, and it was sort of a surprise to me. I'd in the past been de-adminned because I had a phone that was spamming, and Trisha, our old treasurer, temporarily de-adminned me because my phone was spamming something, and of course that was an entirely appropriate de-adminning. I had no issue with it, and that had sort of been the previous experience, and because of these other ideological issues, it got whipped into something that was very different.
I could also add that in my revision of the bylaws, I think the biggest additions I made was to make the conventions more accessible. And my reason for doing that is if the central body of the state is going to have any legitimacy in people's eyes, you want to have as many people participate in the convention as possible. And I did that in two ways. One, by removing the idea of supporting membership and just making anybody registered with the party a member. And also we could extend it to people who are not able to register with the party. And also recommending that the conventions be held online and over a more extended time period to give people more of a chance to participate and get to know the issues and vote. But I haven't heard a lot of pushback on those things. It seems to the few people I talked to, we got a broad membership and quite a number of people active in the party in one area or another, but not too many people have been involved in these conversations around the bylaws. but I haven't had a lot of pushback on that. There's been some receptivity or interest, not necessarily endorsement. But the controversy seems to revolve around more these cell structure, which would replace chapters, and the central body of the state, how those would interact.
Do you have any comments, Xavi? I mean, we don't want to talk your head over.
No, I did read that position paper. I did like both of those ideas of extending the length of the annual conventions so that people do have more opportunity to immerse themselves in that information and be able to make more informed decisions on it and have more opportunities to participate. I did like that. I'm not terribly familiar with the existing structure. I do see the chapters. It looks like there's only 5 of them right now. The cell structure, I mean, it's to me, it's just something that's new and different. So rather than coming up with like a bunch of different like what ifs and working myself up into catastrophizing what could happen, I think that giving something that looks and feels much more grassroots and opportunity could be much more valuable than trying to keep the status quo in place.
Yeah, you know, I think go ahead.
I think that is what everybody's doing, is trying to envision how this will actually work in practice, and none of us know for sure. And so we're predicting different things. And, you know, you can go in one direction or another and say, well, if we give too much power to the cells, this could happen. If we give too much power to the state coordinating committee, this could happen. And it's hard to find the balance or even agree that there is an ideal balance, rather than really weighting it towards the one side or the other out of a sense of safety or a need for change.
You know, I think
like,
that, go ahead.
It seemed like the big issue was how to define leadership within that, right? So that was what people were kind of stuck on.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to respond is, what's the role of the state coordinating committee? And because basically what's happened is, I don't want to get into what happened, but basically it's what's the role of the state coordinating committee, and the desire for the state coordinating committee not to be leading, not to exert any leadership, right? To be there just a facilitator, an administrator, and you just really downplaying the role of the state coordinating committee, which I am totally for. Like, we shouldn't be placed in a position of having to make tough decisions. That's not our role. Having said that, it is unrealistic to expect that anybody is going to act in non-political ways, because the fact of how you spend the money is a political decision. It's a political, I mean, it's a leadership. I mean, you cannot separate it. The fact that we need to have someone that, like, if the media or the state, the Secretary of State wants to contact, somebody needs to have that delegated power. It's going to fall into like the elected state coordinating committee. I mean, there's no way around it. And just that is a leadership political decision. Like, you cannot escape, like, me buying a coffee at Starbucks or not buying from Amazon are political decisions. Like, you cannot separate these decisions from these administrative decisions from decisions that have an effect on the entire state, on the state. So this idea that it has to be a non-leadership and non-political board or committee is great. It's that at some point there will always be a political aspect to it, right? And I think that the role of the state coordinating committee should not be to provide like opinions or statements on one or the other issue, but really to make sure that people don't abuse each other, that the values of the Green Party are upheld, so that we don't have unethical decision-making, so we don't have bullying. I mean, things that are basic, standard practice, common sense, basic guidelines that we can all agree to. If those are guidelines, and those how we talk to each other in non-violent, democratic ways is established in rules or guidelines by everybody agrees, yeah, that's common sense. Like, not being verbally abusive, common sense. Not calling people names, or not making false allegations, common sense. Then if we have those guidelines, the role of the state coordinating committee is just to implement them. And then if there needs to be a final decision, to kick it to the convention, right? But between conventions, somebody needs to take action. Like if somebody's calling, somebody racist names or being very misogynistic and abusing women on some list server, somebody needs to take action between conventions. So, the only body that is empowered to do that is the state coordinating committee. Does the state coordinating committee act on its own without any guidelines? No, it follows very clear guidelines that everybody has agreed to. And in the past few years, we've worked on coming up with guidelines, things that are common sense. Like you show the guidelines to anybody. And Connor, are you coming on a different? Okay. He kind of is, he's technology pronouns. So in that sense, the state coordinating committee is not political in that it just puts into implements and puts into practice things that are agreed upon by the convention, by the general membership. And so in that sense, it is purely administrative facilitating position. But it is unrealistic to expect that it is going to be 100% apolitical, because any decision is political. Like if I decide to spend money on buttons instead of spending money on a flyer, it may be a political decision, right? But that's what it is.
Connor is multiplying. I'm not sure what's happening. I think he's got his hand raised from a back a ways. Connor, are you there somewhere?
Yeah, sorry, my connection was bad. I had to rejoin. I think those are zombie instances. I just wanted to add, kind of in support of what Natalie was mentioning there, that again, our IT team, they end up having executive functions over our communications, and they need also that clarity in the moment that can't necessarily be waiting 2 weeks to run through the SEC to get permission to stop somebody's hacked account, or somebody who's maybe not willfully violating rules and calling people names or whatever, or in some cases maybe they are. But either way, they can't necessarily wait 2 weeks for an SEC meeting. That's not a normal way in which an IT team has to function. And so one thing that I've been thinking about that might just be a best practice that might reduce a little bit of these conflicts is if we try to make sure that once we have enough people, we don't have somebody who's both in an IT function who might be obliged to moderate, who's also in a SEC rivalry with somebody else. It might be good to down the road make sure that our IT team at least has the perception of being strictly neutral, other than simply enforcing whatever agreed upon policies are. Right now, we haven't had enough people necessarily to always pull that off and keep the party running.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more new volunteers though. Sabi, you have any comments or any questions?
No.
I called Brian and see if he would participate. We're going to have 2 more meetings. One September 9, which is Saturday at 10 o'clock, and one September 11, which is 7:30. Hopefully people will participate before coming to the convention, because thrashing this at a convention is just going to be very difficult.
I'm recalling that Dan did show up at one of our last meetings, and then you told him that this was the responding group and that then he should propose a response from the initiating group. And I'm not, I guess nobody's completely sure how this process is supposed to work, but I do think given the timeline we have, it would be good to have everybody in one conversation.
Totally, yeah. I didn't see the entirety of Dan's message and what he's wanting or not wanting.
Yeah, I scanned through it, but it was hard to read because a lot of cross outs and additions.
Yeah.
I wanted I wanted to add real quick, I've dropped in for reference in case we do get a ongoing effort with a bylaws committee, which is something I've seen in other organizations. I thought it relevant to maybe look at our neighbors that we'd be interested in doing a potential future convention with, or a national convention hosting here on the West Coast. The examples of the Washington State Green Party and the California State Green Party, and a number of our people who used to be more active were fresh from the California Greens they ended up moving to Eugene or different places. So at least having that reference and understanding what those folks might be used to, and also if there are any good ideas that we might borrow from while we're doing this process ourselves.
That's a good idea. I'm just constantly aware of time constraints to absorb all this information and make sense of it, because you want to know not only what their bylaws are, but how's it working for them. You don't want to adopt something that sounds good, but proves it wasn't working.
Yeah, and to that end, I'm working on getting a little sample of experience from current California Greens, and so on, that we can include that. And if we do have a bylaws committee that's an ongoing thing, they'd at least have that access.
There's been a lot of problems with California bylaws recently. FYI, like really major issues. I'll send you, somebody sent me a good recap a while back, and I'll just send it to you.
Yeah, I'm noticing that the timestamp on their latest official version is only a year old.
Yeah, there's a major problem going on in California. But I think that what we're doing in Oregon is actually pretty groundbreaking. The fact that we have a mediation process, that we're going through this, trying to form like this very grassroots, really thinking through things with, modern convention processes and so on, is pretty groundbreaking. But, the other thing, one thing that I wanted to mention is that, we can have bylaws and guidelines and, good process, but eventually things boil down to personal behavior and personal responsibility. And that there's nothing that you can protect yourself against that, people who have poor social skills or who don't know how to play well in a team, you can't change that. There's nothing you can do about it.
Certainly putting it in the bylaws doesn't make much of a difference.
No, I mean, we just have to have good guidelines, make sure that, there's this balance between autonomy and accountability, between grassroots and coordination, and then trust that people will behave in respectful, kind ways.
Looking forward toward the convention, which is coming at us very quickly, I think there's only like 3 possible scenarios. One is that we all come up with an agreement of a draft of bylaws that we all can get behind, and then persuade the people at the convention that, yeah, all of us looked at this and think it's great. I'm not sure how realistic that is right now. It's certainly worth trying for. The other one is that, of course, nothing passes and we stay with the same bylaws.
It's not going to happen.
And the final one is that Brian's bylaws and the ones that I wrote with Natalie are up for discussion. So I guess there'd be a vote on each of them sequentially, and rules about, what if both of them pass, or what if neither of them pass? Well, then it's back to the other scenario where we stick with what we got.
Sorry, just please speak, because otherwise we're going to hog the conversation, but feel free to butt in anytime, right? So one possibility is that we agree on like 80% or 90%, and then there's these 2 passages where we disagree, and what we can do is at the convention do a poll and see which version has the most support, or if we can tweak them so that they can be more congruent or something like that. The facilitator we're hiring is extremely experienced, and she's going to present a process like an app called Mural that allows for participation at the convention and for people to kind of be able to, in real time, contribute to these conversations. So she's going to come to the steering committee meeting tomorrow evening. And so she can present it and talk a little bit about it, but she's very, very experienced. So maybe we can have that, okay, in general, this proposal encapsulates what we want. In this area, where's the agreement? In this area, where's the agreement? Eventually, it may come to a vote at the convention. And what we're trying to do is bring enough people at the convention to have as much broad input as possible.
It's going to be a challenge for people to make sense of the differences between the documents and make choices between them, especially if we're trying to do a cut and paste job between them at the convention.
Yeah, that's where having a good facilitator is going to help us. I don't know what her process for the mural is. What you and I, Alan, need to be, to work on is how to present why we put, in the areas of contention, to make a very brief presentation. This is why, this is what it addresses, blah, blah, blah. And for them to propose that, so they, so that these areas can be identified and there can be a brief proposal, maybe a little bit of feedback, something like that. Xavi, you haven't been able to connect with a guy called Ken in Salem, correct?
I did meet Ken once at that get together for the
RCV.
The rank truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How was that?
It was nice. It was very small. A lot of the people that were supposed to show up didn't show up, including the representative from the state legislature that had endorsed the proposal. Like he wound up having another commitment come up and wasn't able to make it there. There was some filming. Sol did a little speech that was recorded there. But yeah, it was nice. It was nice to meet those folks.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was actually they were contacted to do like a little video on proportional representation, ranked choice voting, and so that's what it was about. But it was nice to maybe get some people together that had not met. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get enough gravitas in Salem to create a chapter in Salem. I don't know if you're interested in helping out. I could send you names of people, just let me know. I don't know what your situation is.
Sure. Now's the time.
So we're going to have another meeting Saturday, September 9, and Monday, September 11, 7:30. Saturday, September 9 is at 10 a.m. I'm going to make another call again. I'm going to send an email blast for people to participate so we can thrash out these things before the convention. And hopefully we'll have more feedback. But I think these videos are useful so we can post them because some of the discussion revolves around what needs to be discussed at the convention.
Mm-hmm. Did you say Monday the 11th?
Yes, 7:30.
7:30.
And we'll use the same link, the link that's linked on the conventions page. One last thing, Xavi, we have all of our lists, all of our conversations are taking place in something called Groups.io. Did you try to join Groups.io? Okay, so Groups.io is a list server. Let me send you an invite. So the main Groups.io is for announcements. It's everybody. And then once you get to that page, you can see the different subgroups. A lot of these conversations for the bylaws are taking place in two of the groups. One of them is the organizational structure. And the other one is a large group consensus process. Things are kind of being cross-posted. One is obviously like a bylaws committee sort of thing. The other one is a process for mediation discussion, running the process, and it's led by John Murray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to both of those. And I highly, highly recommend that you do, that you subscribe in digest mode, because you are going to be swamped if you don't with emails,
okay.
right? Or you could get swamped with emails. But if you do digest form, then you'll see the conversations, and then you can go onto online Groups.io and read prior messages and see a little bit what the discussions and the conversations are. And great, so I'll do that. And if you need anything, just let me know.
Will do.
Anything else, Alan, that we should kind of bring up?
Not that I can think of. I did have a conversation with Brian the other night. It seems like the next day he essentially said, no, he doesn't like what I'm proposing. I hope there will be further conversations that we can find, at least identify areas of agreement and disagreement, but we'll see.
I'm gonna, if you can call him to try to come up to one of these meetings. I know that October is a heavy month for accountants, but if he wants his proposal to pass and the bylaws to pass, I really encourage him to participate, because it's not going to happen if everything is thrashed out at the convention.
Yeah, and on top of that, we may deter a lot of people from ever coming back to a convention.
Yeah, I don't,
spending hours and hours trying to figure out bylaws.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons other organizations that I'm in, the convention in essence delegates the power to a conventions or a bylaws committee to spend the hours and hours going through the bylaws, and then come back to the convention with a draft to approve or amend or whatever.
Which is exactly what we're doing. But people are not, participating. So I'm just going to, place a few more calls. And I think that these videos are really important, because we discuss some of these issues and people can get in, an idea of what the issues are.
And I just put in chat there, while it was fresh in my mind, my main thing, I guess, having been starting out as a IT volunteer or social media volunteer with a lot of the active people not very tech savvy back in the era where Tricia was the treasurer, was that I'd been asked to try to find some college kids who might be able to supplement our team, and I'd like to know that just logistically, regardless of any of these ideological considerations, that if we did get some college kids or even the ability to hire somebody part-time, that if they had to do some administrative work, even if it ruffled some feathers, they wouldn't be subjected to months or even years of this kind of crazy behavior.
I think that we have now this large group consensus mediation process, and our guidelines were put out. We have clear guidelines that were generally approved of by everyone. So I think that the picture is very different now, because we have these basic structures in place. Okay. It's really nice speaking with you. It's so nice to see you, Xavi. And say hello to Angela.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Bye.
And reading the documents too. Let me know if you need anything. Okay, bye guys.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.